Hey guys, welcome back to another video. In today's video, I want to take a look at what has changed from the oldest cube I could find to the most modern cube you can find on the market today. Let's go a little bit back in time. Not far enough to when the Rubik's Cube was first invented, for that's another story for another time. But let's go back to 2008. That's about 14 years from now, and this cube was bought by my family. As you can see, it's a very old cube, and the design has changed many times from this to, say, some of the GAN cubes we have today. Let's take a look at some of the design of this cube. First of all, I want to note how simplistic this cube is. As you can see, the bare necessities are basically everything this cube has. I can assume there's a spring, there's a screw, because, there's a little bit of flexibility, and there was plastic and stickers. That's basically everything you need to make a cube. No more and no less. I'm pretty sure the designer of this cube was just looking to make it work. It wasn't designed to be a speed cube, it was just designed to be some random puzzle that you could solve. One thing that has changed a lot over the course of the puzzle of the Rubik's Cube is the amount of gap that is between the pieces. If you take a look here between the two edges, the center and the corner, you'll notice that the gap, or the hole in the middle, is very small. I want you to pay attention to this because as I show more and more puzzles, you'll notice the change of this hole. And I'll discuss it a little bit and why they had to change it so much. As I sort of mentioned before, this puzzle is really simple, and one of the things that it doesn't have is the adjustments that most modern cubes now possess. As you can see, there's no way to adjust the magnets because there isn't any magnets, and there's no way to adjust the elasticity. The only thing that you could really adjust is the tension via the screw, but that's basically it. The last thing I want to note before moving on is the color of the internals. As you can see, right now the internals are primary, or if you're new to cubing, primary just basically means a transparent white plastic. As cubes move on, I feel like the tradition of the internal color sort of changes. It goes from primary right now to, as you will notice, more of a darker color, and finally, in modern times, it kind of comes back to more of a primary tone. But that's going to be all for this cube. Let's move on to the next one. This is the next cube that I want to showcase. I also have two more of these cubes, but really they have similar designs, and I feel like it's enough to just emphasize the specifics of one. So as you can see, these are basically the same. First, I want to bring to your attention these gaps again. As you can see, the gaps have become significantly larger. I don't know if it's quite obvious from the camera, but instead of the more blocky and squared off corners of this cube, we have the more rounded aesthetic of this cube near the inside of the pieces. So as you can see, the corners have a rounded part, the edge have a rounded part, and the center caps also have this rounded part. And the reason for this is corner cutting. If you don't know what corner cutting is, it's essentially the idea of being able to turn a layer while other layers are misaligned. For example, I can turn this top layer a little bit while still being able to, cut through that layer, like this. However, with this more blocky design, it's hard to cut past this line here, which is basically a unit of measurement now in corner cutting. However, with this more rounded design, as you can see, there's not as much of a trouble cutting past this line. You can even almost go halfway and still be able to turn through the piece. And that's a major improvement from this to this. Another change that isn't as obvious if you're just looking at the outside, but it's the piece design. I've talked a little bit about how the pieces got a lot less blocky on this model, and it's not just on the outside. If you kind of open up the cube like this, you'll realize that most of the pieces are rounded off or smoothed off. But if you kind of nudge this open, which you can't do a lot because the springs are not very effective, you'll notice that most of the pieces are very squared off, and it comes back to that idea of the bare necessities. They're not looking for speed, they're just wanting a working puzzle. So with the squared off corners and edges and piece design, it's kind of more intuitive to make it like that. However, when people tried to solve the cube faster, they realized that a more smooth and rounded off design worked a lot better. Next, we come into more of the modern era of cubing. This is about 2020, which is 2 years ago, but this is the GAN 356M 2020 edition. This was actually one of my first speed cubes. You might notice a lot of major changes, and not just on the fact that it's stickerless and all of my previous cubes are stickered, but the design has changed quite significantly. Let's take a look at those gaps again. On here, every single piece is rounded off when it comes into contact with this hole in the middle. However, what you might notice here, and it's a lot more emphasized on the stickerless version, is that all of the pieces except the corner is rounded off. And the reason for this is corner twists. And if you don't know, corner twisting is when you can simply do this, and it's very ineffective during solves, and apparently it's hated by non-cubers. But whenever you corner twist, you have to waste that 0.5 seconds to twist it back, and it really ruins your time. But with the more squared off corners, it's a lot more difficult to do it because the corner is sort of blocking it off against the edges. I mean, it's not impossible if you try hard enough, but it's a lot harder to do so. And especially during solves, it's really hard to accidentally corner twist when you have these squared off corners. I've actually gone ahead and switched this cube where this trait is a little bit more prominent. But the thing I wanted to note is the change in adjustment. As you can see here, we have just simply a spring and a screw. And you can't really see the spring, but I'm sure it's there because, you know, this is nice and elastic and all. But the only thing that you can really adjust is the screw. You can't adjust how far the spring travels, or what we now call spring elasticity. But with this GAN cube, you can actually change all of that. You can switch out the nut for, I believe it's different elasticities, and you can also turn the nut in order to get different tensions. So it's a very nice design which allows you to have a lot more customizability on your Rubik's Cube, because different people like different tensions and spring elasticities, and it's hard to make the perfect cube for, you know, some random person out there in the world. So they just simply made it customizable so that you can adjust it to whatever you want. Maybe the most prominent change between this cube and this cube is the fact that the GAN 356M has magnets. And if you don't know, magnets are positioned between every single pair of corner and edge, and its purpose is to help you align the layers. For example, if I turn on this cube like this, if I turn it a couple of times, I might notice that the layers start getting misaligned. And right now it's not that big of a deal because you have corner cutting and all, but sometimes the layers are misaligned enough so that you get lockups or pops. And this is very ineffective because if you have a lockup or pop during your solve, it will really mess up your time. However, on a GAN 356, you'll realize that the layers are usually a lot more aligned whenever you're turning. And this is due to the fact that the magnets are helping pull all of the pieces together. Sure, there are still lockups and pops sometimes, but they're usually not that common. If I turn it hard enough, sometimes the layers will still get misaligned, but again, it's a lot rarer. Next, I want to quickly talk about the RS3M 2020. You might notice that this is kind of a step backwards, some may say, because this cube is not necessarily better than the one I just showed. However, the major change between this cube and the GAN 356 is the severe reduction in price. The GAN 356 is priced around $30, while this is just $8 to $9 if you get it on a retailer like Speedcube Shop. Surprisingly though, the performance of these two cubes are oddly similar, or not similar, but I can get similar times on them. While reducing that much of a price, Moe has done a really good job keeping this cube nice and budget. Therefore, I would say this is a step forward in the fact that they reduced the price while still keeping the performance similar. Finally, let's talk about the modern architecture of cubes. A reason I showed both of these is each of them has an aspect that I wanted to show, but I don't have a cube that possesses both aspects. The first one I want to talk about is adjustment. We've seen a little bit of adjustment in a GAN 356 and even in an RS3M 2020. However, none of them had adjustable magnets. As you can see, the GAN 11 here has this little tab on the corners that allows you to use a tiny screwdriver or whatever sharp object that can fit in here to push around the magnets. And what it does is you can increase the strength of the magnet to your liking or decrease the strength of the magnet to your liking. And what this allows you to do is even further customize how you want your cube to feel. The GAN 11 also has a very good elasticity system that allows you to adjust tension as well as elasticity while only using 2 nuts as opposed to the 5 or 7 that you can get on the GAN 356. So that's another large step forward in the whole cubing evolution. Another step forward in cubing is maglev. And as you might know, most cubes have a spring that is connected to the screw in order to give the cube a little elasticity. That way, the corner cutting is better, the turning is smoother, and all of that good stuff. However, with maglev, instead of the spring, we have 2 magnets of opposing poles that allows them to kind of bounce and act similarly to a spring. While some may say this is quite a large change, I personally don't feel that big of a difference between maglev and non-maglev cubes. However, all good changes come with experimentation. I feel like this is a nice experiment and it might evolve into something amazing in the future. To wrap it all up, here is a timeline of all of my cubes. As you can see here, the design went from everything that is necessary to a cube that people have used to solve under 5 seconds or 3 seconds and all of that crazy stuff. So without the evolution of this cubing architecture, I believe speed cubing cannot have gone where it was to where it is now. That's going to be all for today's video. I hope you guys learned something about the evolution of Rubik's cubes, and specifically I wanted to focus on maybe why the gaps have gotten larger and then smaller and all of that good trivia. But with that, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in another video. Goodbye!